Hello, my friends. Today, the activity on the front line remains intense. Unfortunately, the Russians continue the assaults along the entire front line. Let's start right away with the Pokrovsk direction. Here, the Russians have begun actively stretching the flanks and gradually they are succeeding. Today, they are heavily shelling the areas of Novotoretsk, Volodymyrivka, Shahove, and Poltavka, aiming to seize full control of this territory in the near future. At the same time, assaults on the village of Koptiva are ongoing. The situation near Novoekonomichne is also extremely difficult. The Russians are storming the village of Myrne, which is nearby, and part of the village has entered a gray zone. For now, there are no confirmed breakthroughs by Russian forces into Novoekonomichne. They are also attacking Myrolюбівка and Lesivka, pushing toward the Zvirova area, assaulting Udachne, and trying to advance further toward Sergiyevka and Novomikhailivka. So they are continuing to stretch the flank here as well. And as we can see, because they have been unable to fully capture Udachne for some time, they are now trying to semi-encircle the village. If that village falls, it would open a direct road to Sergiyevka, where Russian breakthroughs have already been reported in the fields nearby. The situation here is extremely difficult, and the Russians are sparing no resources in their effort to advance. The situation around Novopavlivka is also tense. Here, the Russians have closed in on the Dnipropetrovsk region from two sides. This means they'll likely attempt a breakthrough soon. For now, the fighting is ongoing in the areas of Horihove, Oleksiivka, the village of Zaporizhzhia, and Perebudova. The Russians are trying to dig in there while the Ukrainian forces are working to push them back. Meanwhile, Russian forces continue to shell the frontline areas and prepare for further movement in the direction of Velika Novosilka. The Russians continue to assault the village of Shevchenko in an effort to fully take it under their control. They are also attacking the area of Vilne Pole, but so far there have been no new changes over the past 24 hours. The Ukrainian forces are trying to repel all attacks. Also, the situation here is gradually worsening. Soldiers on the ground describe the situation as follows. On the Novopavlivka front, the situation continues to deteriorate. The Russians have taken Shevchenko and nearly all of Vilna Pole. Shevchenko is a key crossroads on the way to Iskra, and now that area faces a flanking threat. It's important to note that the situation didn't worsen just yesterday or the day before. This is the result of a cascade of problems that have been building for months. When one brigade is forced to cover the responsibilities of two, it's hard to talk about effective defense. But the brigade holding this position is doing so as effectively as possible and inflicting heavy losses on the Russians. And do you know why this section wasn't reinforced earlier? Because response sent up the chain made everything look just fine. That's the root of the problem. Most likely, the Russian objective in this sector is to reach the eastern bank of the Vovcha River in the Dnipropetrovsk region near Novoselivka and Orostopil. What happens next depends on how events unfold. In the direction of Gulay-Polem, the Russians are assaulting Malinivka and shelling the area, but over the past 24 hours there have been no changes along the front line. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, The Russians are attempting to break through near Novoandriivka and Ashalan-Kamiansk. However, they have been unable to make any further progress along the front line, and all their attacks are being successfully repelled by the Ukrainian armed forces. In the Kherson direction, the Russians are pushing near the Antonivsky Bridge and Ashal on the right bank, but as before, they have had no success and the situation has remained unchanged over the past 24 hours. Now let's move to the Kostiantynivka direction. The situation here is also difficult, and after the Russians captured Alexandro Kalinovo, the situation in Yablunivka worsened. The Russians are launching assaults to capture this last village and reach the highway. On the eastern flank, attacks on Bila Hora continue now from two directions, and they are also storming Pretechane. Clearly, the Russians are trying to advance toward Kostiantynivka at any cost from both sides. As for Sherbinivka, the Ukrainian forces are still holding the defense despite the catastrophic situation and near encirclement. The only way to retreat is through the area of Katerinivka and the village of Klebanbyk, where the distance to the front line is just 800 meters. This entire area is under the control of FPV drones. However, no new changes have been recorded of the front line of the past 24 hours. In the Siversk direction, the Russians are pushing in the areas of Grigorivka and Verkhnyo-Kamiansk, but so far they have been unable to advance further, and the front line has remained unchanged over the past day. In the Lyman direction, the Russians are assaulting Zarychne, Kolodezi, and Zelena Dolina, and are trying to break through toward Druzhelyubivka. Activity here is very high, but despite all the challenges, the Ukrainian forces are still managing to hold the defense, and there have been no new changes so far. Similarly, there is high activity in the Borova area. The Russians are storming Nova Krugliakivka, Zeleny High, and Kopanki, and are trying to break through near Raigorodka. However, the Ukrainian forces are holding the line, and there have been no further Russian advances. In the Kupiansk direction, the Russians are assaulting Holubivka and attempting to break through near Stepovanovoselivka. However, there have been no new Russian advances so far, and the capture of Redkivka hasn't been confirmed. In the Dvorichna direction, all attacks have ceased and the front line remains unchanged for now. However, it's highly likely that the Russians are conducting another regrouping and new assaults should be expected. In the Kharkiv direction, the Russians are attempting to advance toward the settlement of Liptsi and are carrying out shelling, but so far they have been unable to make further progress and the front line hasn't changed over the past day. In Vovchansk, fighting continues and new attacks on Vovchansky Hutori have been reported. Shelling remains intense and FPV drones are actively used in the area, but there have been no changes over the past day. In the Sumy direction, the situation has stabilized for now, although activity is slowly beginning to rise again. The Russians are still trying to move forward. We're waiting to see how events will unfold, but General Syrsky stated that the situation has been stabilized. He personally visited this direction to verify the Ukrainian forces' progress. And here is what the Russian side is saying. They're reportedly shocked by the losses in the Sumy region. I watched several videos today filmed by our group, which ended up semi-encircled in the area of Alexeyevka and Andriivka on the Sumy front. It's absolute carnage there. All the three lines are full of bodies. There is heavy fighting going on in that area right now. Our forces stopped the Ukrainian counterattacks and began advancing again. The Ukrainians have posted footage filmed near Andriivka in the Sumy region. It's been online for a couple of days. Those are our assault troops dead. At the same time, despite these major losses, the Russians, as I already mentioned, have again started increasing the number of attacks today. Ukrainian soldiers on the ground described the situation like this. The Russian advance in Sumy hasn't been completely stopped. Yes, perhaps the situation is no longer critical or out of control, but it's still difficult and far from stable. This is especially true for the settlements of Yunakivka, Yablunivka, Novopavlivka, Andriivka, and Varachine. In these areas, there have been tactical level advances by the Russians. The Russians were pushed out of Andriivka, but attempts to regain control of the village and lost positions are constant. I just really don't like the flashy headlines from the general staff. First, they say the situation is stabilized, the Russians have been stopped, and then a week later, the stopped Russians suddenly push 3-5 kilometers forward. And what then? Will we call that stopped too? Slowing down the tempo of the advance not equals stopping the advance. All in all, the war continues. Meanwhile, Putin is once again complaining that the West wants to take his money.
We all know this, it's no secret. A significant portion of our gold and foreign currency reserves, Russian reserves, has been frozen in Western banks. And they keep talking about stealing our money. As soon as that happens, the movement toward regionalization of payment systems will, without a doubt, accelerate and become irreversible. So, perhaps, and this is overall good for the global economy, maybe it's even worth paying for. But I do have a legal background. I said the theft of our gold and foreign currency reserves. Theft is a secret stealing of property. This is open. This is robbery.
In short, nothing is really changing right now, and Putin clearly isn't interested in a peaceful resolution. On the contrary, the conflict continues to escalate. Friends, be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all this latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.